Again, my name is Cassidy, for those of you who don't yet know me, and I am the Communications and Program Director at the Goethe-Zentrum, Atlanta. We're so happy that we were able to partner with Melissa Zimmerman, who has her lovely Instagram and food blog, A Malicious Life, for this Deutsche Küche in den USA series. And we are actually the German Cultural Center of the Southeast, servicing 6 states across the Southeastern United States, but with our headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia. And we offer cultural programming and support for local students and educators in the German language and culture, as well as our own language courses. So if you are not a native speaker of German and you've ever been interested in learning German, please feel free to check out our website with our language offerings. Right now, we are offering a gift certificate. So if you're looking for things to add for your Christmas list and you want to take a class with us, maybe go ahead and send the link that I'm putting in the chat to your friends and family so they know what to buy you for Christmas. You know, your shoe size, go to Centrum language class. And so that's what we're doing right now for the month of December. And during this meeting, you can have your videos on if you're taking with us, or your videos off. I do ask everybody to mute yourselves unless you're asking a question to Melissa. That way there's just a little limited background noise. And if you have a question throughout, you can feel free to unmute yourself and shout it out to Melissa while she's cooking, or if you're more comfortable writing it in the chat, I can read it for you aloud, and that way Melissa still gets to answer it. And we are recording this event, and it will be posted to YouTube on Monday, and you'll get the link and the recipes again emailed to you in your inbox on Monday. I think that's all from my side, and so I'll hand it over to our lovely host, Melissa.
Thank you, thank you. Sorry for the ones who have been here every week, but I'm gonna introduce myself again real quick. As Cassidy said, my name is Melissa. I've been born and raised in Germany, but I came to the US about 5 years ago. And my passion was always to bake and cook. So last year I decided to do a culinary school besides my regular job. And it was a really, really nice program at the Kennesaw State University. And I got to work in some of the really famous restaurants in Atlanta, like the Four Seasons Hotel, and also at Canoe and Seed. Yeah, and I'm happy that today we are gonna do another really German traditional dish, Brezeln. In German, you would also call them Laugenbrezeln. And today we're gonna do like a home version of it, because in the regular bakery kitchen, the lye is gonna be made usually with sodium hydroxide, and that's just something that's really dangerous, and I don't want to be responsible for anything about that. So there's a nice version you can do at home with baking soda, and that's what we're gonna do today. And like Cassidy said, please feel free to make this as interactive as possible, ask questions, bake with me, stop me if I'm going too fast, just go ahead and yeah, let me know how you're doing. And I wanna see some pretzels, of course, from your side, and I would say, we're gonna go ahead and get started because we have a lot of work to do today. I've modified the recipe slightly than what you received, but you don't have to worry. It's just a few modifications to the actual number of the measurements. So you should have everything at home, but I baked a lot of pretzels these past few weeks to kind of perfection the recipe. So yeah, let's see how it's gonna go today. It's a lot of fun. So what we're going to do today is we're going to prepare our dough, because the dough will have to proof. So we need to start with that right now, and I'm going to explain a little bit why we are doing that. So go ahead and get your kitchen scale, and also depending on how warm or cold it is in your house, what I did is I put the oven on the lowest temperature that is available, because the yeast dough usually proofs the best at like 80 degrees. So you also don't want to do it too hot. So I put it on, and I'm gonna even shut it off again, because I look at my oven thermometer and it says about 100 degrees, and that's just too hot. So if you haven't done that yet, just maybe put your oven on real quick on the lowest temperature possible, or if your oven has like a warm button, you can do that too. And then once you put the dough in, we're gonna turn it off again. But just that will help us to get the dough rise a little faster, because we are a little bit on a time crunch. So let's go ahead and do that. We are gonna start with the flour. So if you look through the internet or so, you're gonna find some recipes that use pastry or bread flour, or in German we have the different Mehltypen, which is the flour types. They are defined through some numbers in Germany. So for example, 550 or 405, and then some recipes they use the 405 flour, which in the US is more like the pastry flour. And the difference is just the protein percentage in the flour. So, but we are using all-purpose flour today, and that's completely fine. So you're gonna measure 200 grams of flour. 500 grams. And then also one thing, so in Germany, we have like the fresh yeast, or in the US, it's called cake yeast. It's really common in Germany. I don't know in the US. It's really hard to find for some reason. So it's more common to use the active dry yeast. And I always recommend that you don't buy too much of active dry yeast or yeast in general, because it also can expire. And the same goes for baking soda, the same goes for baking powder. That's just not something you want to buy in like really big scale, because it just can expire and then it won't work anymore. If you want to test if your yeast is still active, what you can do, instead of, we are gonna put all of our ingredients in the bowl already, but if you want to test your yeast, you can use the milk or warm water first and put the yeast in there and a teaspoon of sugar, and then you let it sit for like 10 minutes after you stirred it a little bit, and then if you see like bubbles, then you know your yeast is still active. Okay, so if you have any fresh yeast at home, feel free to use that. I would if I had some, but I don't. So I'm going to use the active dry yeast, and I'm going to use 14 grams. And then we are going to use some milk, and we are also going to heat that up. Where is my little measurement? Yeah. So there's also a lot of pretzel recipes that use water, and you can use that if you don't want to use the milk. There are some differences in Germany, depending if you're more in the north or in the south, how the pretzels are made. And I mean, the pretzel in general is more something that's more popular in the south. And honestly, like for us, that's our fast food. So you go in a bakery when you are out, for example, shopping, when you walk around, when you have a little break at work, and that's what we get. We just get a pretzel. Or a Butterbrezel. Butterbrezel is just the pretzel smothered with some butter, and that's honestly just the best thing ever. And it's also really common that when you walk around and you see, for example, some parents walk with their little kids, and instead of giving the kids a pacifier, they have a pretzel in their mouth. Just that's like a German thing. And then also, depending on if you go down to Bavaria or if you are more in Swabia, the pretzels are eaten differently, but I'm gonna mention that a little later. But today I chose to use milk, but if you prefer water, you can take that. And
Melissa, one question that's come up is if you're halving the recipe, can you use the same proportions? So you just split everything in half?
Yeah, totally. I did that the last 2 days, so you can split it in half. For sure.
And is that milk in your glass?
Is it what?
What's in your glass? Is it milk or?
In which glass? In this? This is milk, yes.
Oh, on the scale.
Auf der Waage, was ist noch drin?
There's nothing in here.
Oh, it looks like it.
But the milk is gonna go in there. So we are gonna use, so in the recipe, I think I wrote 250 milliliters. We are gonna use 300 instead. A little modification I did. So use 300.
Solo tienen 25.
Excuse me? think someone mentioned something.
Sorry, someone was unmuted. Someone was unmuted. Sorry.
That's fine. So 300 milliliters of milk or water. And then what we are going to do is we're going to heat that up a little bit. But also here we need to be careful because it should only reach between 100 and 110 degrees Fahrenheit. And I think in Celsius, that's like, I think between 35 to 45 to 40 degrees, I think. But maybe calculate it if you want to be sure. But you cannot have it too hot because if the liquid is too hot, you're going to destroy the yeast bacteria. So I'm going to put it in the microwave for about 45 seconds. And in the meantime, I'm going to put in the butter. Actually, I'm going to measure the butter separately because you also want to make sure that the butter is room temperature. What's the milk temp again? Between 100 to 110 Fahrenheit. And also I'm using 40 grams of butter instead of 50, but 50 is also completely fine. It's just something I chose to do. And you want to make sure it's room temperature or even a little soft. So I'm actually going to put that in the microwave for a few seconds as well. And I'm going to measure the milk real quick. If you don't have a thermometer, you can literally just put your little finger in there. Hopefully you watched it before. And it just should be lukewarm, but not hot. So mine is at 90, so I'm going to heat it up a little more. Obviously, it depends on your microwave how much seconds you will need. So just play around with that a little bit. And also, you will see that the recipe calls that we are going to put some salt into the dough. You don't want to put the salt in yet. We're going to put in the salt at the very last because you never want to put salt directly in contact with the yeast before the yeast is going to be incorporated into the other ingredients because it destroys the yeast bacteria as well. So always remember, salt and yeast, they're no friends. So let's see. Okay, a little bit more. All right, that should be fine. And in the meantime, I'm going to put the butter in for just like 10 seconds. Yep, much better. Okay, so I'm going to put the butter in, the flour and the yeast, put it in there in a few little scoops. All right. We're going to put the milk in. And then a lot of the pretzel recipes, they also call for malt powder. If you don't have that, don't worry. I don't have it either. So we're just going to use a little bit of honey, just like a teaspoon. But you can also just use a teaspoon of sugar. That's completely fine. it just helps to convert the starches into sugar, and it will make the dough rise a little more easy. I even have some German honey here. It was very expensive. All right, and then I'm gonna go ahead and mix that a little bit. I'm just using a bench scraper. You can obviously also do this in your KitchenAid with the dough hook on if you don't want to do it by hand, but I thought since we did some nice arm workouts the last few times, we're gonna do that for today's session as well. So I'm just gonna mix it together a little bit. And then at the end, I'm gonna just add about like a teaspoon, more or less, of salt. And then you can either put some flour on your kitchen counter, just sprinkle a little bit, or I have this baking mat. So I'm going to put the dough on here so we can net it to a nice smooth dough. It's going to be a little sticky, but that's okay. All right. So we want to make sure that all the ingredients are nice and incorporated, and that the dough is just going to be a nice smooth dough. So just go ahead and work that in. And I don't know about you, but I really love the smell of making some yeast dough. I think that's just so, it just smells so good.
Melissa?
Yeah.
Our dough is very crumbly and very dry. What do we do with it?
Did you put the milk in?
Yes. I might have put, I don't have a kitchen scale, so I might have put way too much flour.
Okay.
But
do you have any indication of how much you put in?
Well, I used a measuring cup, a German measuring cup, where it's and I put 400 grams in.
Okay.
We do have the 250 milliliters of milk.
Put another 50 milliliters of milk in it.
Okay, thank you.
And the dough will be kind of, it will be like a tougher dough, but it's gonna be still a little sticky. And we're just gonna net it for a little while. Get the arm workout in. And just really dig into it with the bottom of your palm. That's where you have the most strength. Turn off my oven. And then at the end, when you think that everything is nice and incorporated, we're gonna form it to a little ball. So how we do that, you just have your dough and then you dig in with your palm and kind of flap over all four sides. And then you have a nice little ball of dough. And then we're going to put that into the bowl. Just put it in there, and then we're going to put a towel over it. And put it in the warm place. So as I mentioned, I'm going to put it into my oven that I shut off now. And I'm also leaving the door open and not letting the hot air go out a little bit, because as I said, we don't want it to be too hot. And I'm going to set a timer for 30 minutes. In general, you want to just see that the dough rises to be double as high as it was before. So sometimes they can take a little longer. That can go a little faster. That really depends on the temperature in your house or where you put the dough. It depends if you have the dry yeast or the fresh yeast. That's just really varies. Just want to make sure that it rises double as high. I'll just go with my hands.
Sorry, Melissa, did you add the salt already?
Yeah, go. Sorry, can you say again?
Did you add the salt already?
Yes, I added that once I incorporated all the ingredients, just a little bit, and then I added the salt. Is everyone doing okay with it though? Because while that is rising, we are going to go ahead and do the spreads.
I'm okay with the dough, but I can't work as fast as you, and mine isn't as pretty as yours.
Okay, it does not need to be pretty.
But if it can be ugly, it's great. It's really neat to learn so much from you. So thank you.
Of course, thank you for participating. So as I mentioned, the pretzels are eaten a different way depending on where you are in Germany, or of course also depending on what the people like. How I know it the most is, so in Germany, in the evening we have something called Brotzeit, and I think someone instant pot with a yogurt setting, you can proof bread in there. Oh, that's a good tip too. Thanks, Barbara. In Germany, we have something called Brotzeit in the evening, or it does not always have to be in the evening, but that's how I grew up, or we call it also Vesper. And Brotzeit basically means bread time. So that's when we eat our German bread, or like today, the Brezel. And my highlight was just always to eat it with butter, or what we do is also, we eat it with some cold cuts, we eat it with cheese. We don't do it the American way to dip it in like cheese sauce. That's new to us, but I'm sure it's really good too. And I think there's another question. Cassidy, can you read the
Sorry,
question?
yeah. What would Monse and David are wondering what the difference in time would be if you're using dry yeast or fresh yeast for the rising, and which yeast did you use?
I use the dry yeast because in the US it's hard to find the fresh yeast. The timing, it depends. It doesn't have to be much different. So the 30 minutes that I'm doing today, 30, 40 minutes, some people let it rise an hour. It just depends on temperature. And if we went on a time crunch, I would maybe let it rise also more like 40 minutes, but it's totally fine, the 30 minutes. Yeah, you just have to always make sure that your yeast is still fresh. So the dry yeast, that you don't have it for too long because it can expire. And that's why if you are not sure, you want to prove it first before you bake in some warm water or milk, and then put the sugar in it, and then you will see if it bubbles and you can test if it's still alive. I hope that helped. So in Bavaria, they eat the pretzels a lot of times with something called Oberster. Very interesting word, I know. It's nothing what we make today, but I wanted to mention it. It's a cheese spread, or even almost a dip, and it's made of camembert. There's even some beer in it. So if you want to Google that, you can Google that too. It's really delicious. But for today, I chose two different spreads. So for one, we make an Eieraufstrich, so that's an egg spread. And then for the other one, that's a little bit more of a sweet spread. It also tastes really, really good on some bread or baguette. It's a date spread, so a Dattelaufstrich. And let's just start with the one with the egg spread. So we are gonna need 4 hard-boiled eggs. And we are just gonna go ahead and peel them. Obviously in Bavaria, it's also very common to eat the Brezeln with the Weißwurst, the sausage, and some sweet mustard, and obviously also have a beer. And believe it or not, some people eat that for breakfast too. Yeah, but it also tastes really, really good. That's more of the typical stuff that you get, for example, when you go to the Oktoberfest. All right. So we have the 4 hard-boiled eggs, and we're just gonna cut them into small pieces, like really small pieces. So I'm just gonna have the egg, and I hope you can see that. I'm just gonna cut it into a few stripes, and if you have an egg cutter at home, you can use that too. But then you're just gonna.
Sorry, Melissa. David and Montse are asking, how do you boil your eggs without cracking them? And sometimes between the yolk and the whites, it gets a little darker.
It does. I'm not sure actually why that is, but what I do, I use a pot and I put water in it, like almost like 3/4 full. And then I bring it to a boil. I put the eggs out of the fridge before, like when I start the water. So I put them out of the fridge, and then once the water boils, I put the eggs. I use this soup spoon, and I put like 2 eggs in here, and I put them into the water really slow, because sometimes I just put a little bit of water in there, get them a little used to the hot water, and then I put them in. And usually that prevents that they crack open when you boil them. And then for this recipe, I let them boil for about 10 minutes. So you want to make sure the water is still boiling when you have the eggs in the water. And yeah, I let them in there for 10 minutes, so they are really all the way boiled through. But if I make the hard-boiled eggs to just eat it on the side, I let them in for like 7-8 minutes, so the egg yolk it's hard, but it's not completely dried out. Yeah, I hope that helps. If not, please let me know.
Awesome. Thank you. And Dagmar is also curious that the oven is supposed to be at 80 degrees Celsius with the dough and the door closed.
No, it's Fahrenheit. So I shut my oven off because the lowest temperature that I have is the warm setting, and it gets to almost 100, 150 degrees Fahrenheit. So I just had that on in the beginning, and then I shut it off because we don't want it to be too hot. And then I even leave the door open of the oven now. I put the bowl in, but I leave the door a little cracked, so the warm heat can go out. And we have I put a just a kitchen towel on top of it, so that should be fine. And now see, now my temperature says it's the lowest that is possible even on the thermostat. So I'm just gonna shut the door, and that should be fine.
So she said so it's 80 degrees Fahrenheit and the oven door is open. So I guess my understanding, if you just said, is that the oven isn't on right now. It's just still has the heat from when you had it on before.
That's correct. And
Yeah.
if you feel like it's too hot, that's why I left the door open in the beginning. But if you feel like it is still warm, but it cooled off a little bit, it's not like 150 degrees, then you can close the door. So I just closed the door. You just want to make sure it's not too hot, because that will also destroy the yeast dough. Yeah, it's just a little helper to let the dough rise, because I don't know what temperature it is in your house right now, but it's a little colder. So, you know, otherwise you would need to let it proof much longer today. So just for the time's sake.
Awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm. But if you have a space in your house where there is the sun shining in and it's nice and warm, you can obviously also just put the bowl into the sun. That's perfectly fine. So I'm just slicing the eggs in really little pieces. And it does not need to be pretty. Right. And usually this recipe calls for fresh chives, which is Schnittlauch. Unfortunately, our grocery store is out of it. So I'm just going to replace it with some scallions today, with some green onions. And I'm hoping it will taste as good too. Alrighty. So once you have all that, I'm just gonna put the little eggs. I'm gonna show it into the camera. So as you can see, it's really, there's like light. It's really small. And we are just gonna put it in a little bowl. And then usually you would use the chives, but I'm gonna use the spring onions instead, just because I don't have chives. And if you don't like any of these, you honestly just don't have to use them. That's really all about your preference. And obviously you can also use some dried chives or so, whatever you find. That's totally fine too. I'm just peeling off the first layer. Taking off the first, the stem. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and cut them into really thin slices. And usually you don't use the full spring onion. It depends on the actual piece, but sometimes the very end, it's just a little bit too hard and it doesn't have too much flavor. So you can stop after like three quarters or so. But the chives or the spring onion would just make it a really nice, gives it like a refreshing taste. Okay, and then we're gonna use some sour cream. So in Germany, you would use Schmand or saure Sahne, which is basically called, it's sour cream. Or you can use some creme fraiche if you have that too. And we're gonna use about 4 tablespoons. And we're just gonna put that into the bowl as well. And obviously you can start with less first and then just see how it tastes for you. And then we're gonna use some salt and pepper. So I'm just gonna start with like maybe half a teaspoon. And that was not in the recipe, but something that you can also add is just a little bit of mustard. So that's what I'm going to do. Just gives it a nice little taste upgrade. I'm just using some Dijon mustard. And just like a little and then we are just gonna mix that all together. I'm gonna do it this way so you can see it. And obviously you can use more chives or spring onion, then you can use more or less mustard, same with pepper and salt. You're just gonna have to taste it. That's like the #1 thing I learned in all the kitchens is that the cooks always taste their food. And honestly, sometimes that's not the most pleasant thing to do if you start really early at like 7 a.m. or 8 p.m. and you have to taste some, I don't know, soup or meat or I don't know. It just was always something where I was like, meh. Not in the mood for it, but.
Barbara asked, in German cooking, is using sour cream as a base, not big. So German cooking is using sour cream as a base, not big mayo eaters. We never had it growing up.
That's true. That's true. We have a lot of times we use the Miracle Whip. Not sure how to translate that, but it's a little lighter, more maybe a little yogurt based, I would say. It's just a little bit more refreshing. Okay, so I'm gonna try that. A little bit more salt and pepper. But yes, I can approve it's tasting well even with the spring onions, so that's fine. And then I'm just gonna put it in a bit of a nicer bowl. And then if you want to serve this, you can use just a bit more chives or spring onion. And just put some of it on top of it. It just looks nicer. So just sprinkle some on top of it, and maybe some red pepper. And then I'm hoping, let me get something that I can hold, maybe that you can see this better. We have the Eieraufstrich. And I'm just going to put that to the side for later. Let's see what the time says, 9 minutes, okay. That's good. So we can do our other spread real quick. It's a little bit of a sweeter spread. So what we're going to do, first of all, is everyone good in timing and following ahead? I need some thumbs up. I'm taking the silence as a yes. Oh, I see some thumbs. Thank you. So we're gonna do the date spread, and honestly, that's really something that I love. I love dates, and that spread is just, it tastes so good, and just on some baguette. Even so, in Germany also the barbecue is different. We call it Grillen. We usually don't really have burgers or things like that. We have some maybe some chicken meat or some sausages, obviously, maybe some steaks, and then we have a lot of different salads as a side, and also some baguette that we either, you put it even on the grill a little bit, or you have it in the oven first, and you cut it in thin slices, and then you put that spread on it, and it's so good. It's so good. So for that, we are going to take another bowl, and we're using some cream cheese, about 200 grams, and I'm just going to use a whole package of the Philadelphia here. That's about, I think, 226, so it's 8 ounces. I'm just going to use all of that. And I'm just gonna, if I can get this to open. Put that in the bowl. And then you need some dates, about 100 grams. So I took like 9 to 10 dates, depends on the size. And you want to remove the pits. It's a little sticky, but it's worth it. All right. And then we want to also chop them into little pieces. Also really important here is a sharp knife, because it's just very sticky and it can be a little hard. And then we're just gonna put that in the bowl with the cream cheese. Maybe you could even put them into a little like a blender or something like that to get them chopped up. I've not tried this, but it might work. It depends on how sharp the knives, I guess, are in your kitchen machine. Are there some other German dishes that you guys missed or remember, or that are your favorites? I would be interested to hear about that. For those who were in Germany before, or just
I miss the mandolin hornchens.
Oh, that's good.
They're good.
I miss Döner.
Döner, yeah. Yep, I can agree to that.
Mishika says she misses Dampfnudeln.
Oh, yes. And this year is the first year that I'm not going to go home for Christmas. And usually that's the one and only dish that I ask my grandmother to do when I'm home. So maybe I just need to learn to make them myself too. And the doner.
If you do make it, put it on your Instagram, and maybe everybody else can make it on for Christmas too.
That's a good idea. So I know there are also a lot of differences actually for Dampfnudeln. I know a lot of people eat them with the salt crust and some potato soup, for example. Or my grandmother, she makes them actually with a caramel crust on the bottom. So you make them in some milk and sugar, and it gets like a nice crust. And then we eat them with she makes like a leek potato soup, but a lot of people eat them also with vanilla sauce, I think.
Maybe we could make them here, Melissa, this Christmas. Maybe we could make them here this Christmas.
Yeah.
At our house.
Yeah.
We could give it a go.
We can give it a go. That's a good idea.
Your dad says Rollbraten.
He says what?
Rollbraten?
Rollbraten.
I don't think I know those.
It's basically how would you describe that? It's meat and it's more round and it's filled with different like fillings. Some have like broccoli or some stuff in that, and then almost like a stuffing, and then you make it in the you make it in the oven. Yeah, that's how I would describe it.
Dough, like stromboli?
I don't know. So there's no dough on it though. It's just the meat, and then they put it together with some strings so it doesn't fall apart. I think usually it's pork meat. So.
Barbara says it's a thin flank steak.
Flank steak, that's the right word probably.
And Carol Ann says roulade.
Rouladen?
Rouladen?
Around. Yeah, rouladen is good too. Okay, and also for this recipe, we're gonna use spring onions again. And just chop them up.
Your dad says Maultaschen also.
Oh yeah, Maultaschen. And I have no idea how to translate that in English from August. Oh, timer. Good timing. Okay. Put the spring onions also into the cream cheese mix. And then we need some chili powder, or you can also use some paprika powder. I forgot to put mine out. There we go. And that's something you can just kind of wing that, how much you need or want. So I'm gonna just start with 1 teaspoon. And then also we're gonna use salt and pepper. Really easy. And I think in this case I'm going to use a fork because the cream cheese is just a little more stiff. And you just want to all mix that up. It's definitely not a workout. So I'm going to use a little bit more. All right. And I'm just gonna put that all into another bowl. All right. And we will just keep that for later. So it's literally just a big pot of cream cheese, dates, spring onion mix spread. And just gonna put that to the side because the timer for our dough went off and we wanna continue. All right.
Melissa, how much paprika did you use?
I use now about 1.5 teaspoons.
Okay. Yeah, because this looks a little bit red.
Yeah,
You know?
so it has a nice little red color to it. All right. Let's see how our dough turned out. Yep, looks good. So you can see it did rise. So next steps. Now comes the fun part. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to punch the dough first, just get the air out. And then I'm going to take it out of the bowl. And I'm going to just knead it a little bit. and form it to like a roll. And then I'm gonna split it up in into pieces of the same size, and I use them for I use about 90 to 100 grams for each piece. So I'm just gonna use my, I'm gonna put this away, my kitchen scale, just to weigh them. And it does not have to be accurate, it's just so you have them kind of the same size in the end, so they will all bake the same way. And you can obviously make bigger or smaller pretzels, just depends on how you like them. And you will feel that the dough, it's kind of stiff and gooey. The weight is 90 to 100 grams per piece. And then if you have some leftovers, you can just spread it between the different pieces. All right. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just form every piece to a little round, how do you call it? Little round pieces. You just do it between your hands, so you put your palms kind of like into a little round form and just form it a little bit. So for timing purposes, I'm gonna just go ahead and I show you 2 pretzels. I'm gonna go ahead with the next steps for those because there's another in-between step until we can put them into the lye. And then I'm gonna show you more of how to form the pretzels, but just for the timing reasons. So once you form them to some little round circles, you're gonna use each piece and you just net it a little bit until it feels a little sticky. And then what we are going to do, we are going to roll them out. So first you have like a little roll, and then you use your hands. And some people like to use more the palm. Some people like to use more the fingers, and you spread them wide. And what you want to do is you want to widen them up for about 60 centimeters in general. It's like as big as my mat is, and I think in inches it's about 22. That's just, it's a direction. It does not have to be like that, but they need to be long. And then also you want to leave the middle part a little thicker than the outer part, because when you look at the pretzel, they have a little, in German we call them Bauch, so it's called stomach. It's their stomach. It's a little thicker. So in order to do that, you want to leave the middle piece a little thicker and then roll out the rest of the dough. And then the ends, you don't want to put them too thin. You want to leave some Knöpfler, so it's like a little little piece of thicker dough. So that will be the ends that will then be put on the rest of the pretzel. And you can definitely stretch that out quite a bit because it will, in the end, will kind of shrink back down a little. So you want to make sure it's nice and long. And it will take you a little bit in the beginning. So how they do it, so now you see we have a pretty long string. So what you want to do is you're going to take the ends and you cross it. And then you cross it again and you fold it up and you press it down a little bit. And then you have your pretzel. If you watch the bakeries, they do it a little faster. So they take the whole string, they swing it, and they put it down. So try both, have fun with that. And I'm obviously going to show that again. So one step that we are going to do before we're going to put it in the baking soda bath is we want to put them, and that it's not necessary, but I recommend it. I'm going to put the formed pretzels after they just rest a few minutes after I formed them into the freezer. So they will get kind of stiff and they will form a nice outer layer around them so that, for example, when they use it in the bakeries, the lye does not go into the dough. So you can also put them in the fridge for about an hour or so, but just for timing reasons. And honestly, I like them better in the freezer. It just gets a little harder and it will be a bit better then, because you will see later when you put that into the baking soda bath that they will get, they open up a little bit and just get kind of slimy. So that just helps to keep the form nice. So just play around a little bit, and I'm also going to show you after I made those two. You can obviously also make the Laugenbrötchen, which are the lye rolls. So if you don't always want to form the pretzels, you can make, there are a lot of different forms that you, oops, see, that shouldn't happen. So sometimes if it rips, you just want to let it relax a little bit, but I'm going to see if it lets me continue. Yeah, so there are a lot of different variations that you can make if you don't want to form the pretzels all the time.
Michelle said that the first pretzel looks great.
Thank you. I practiced a lot. A lot of practice the last few weeks. All right. This one might be a little too small. That's okay. So usually you want to let them rest for about maybe another 5 to 10 minutes after you formed them. But I'm going to go ahead and use those already. So if your freezer is big enough, you can obviously put all of them on a baking sheet and put them in the freezer. But unfortunately, the door just does not close by an inch for me here. So I'm just going to use 2 of them and put them in the freezer for now. Just make sure they have the form that you want when you put them in, because obviously you cannot reform them afterwards. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and form the other ones. So what you can also do is you can make the Laugenbrötchen, and for that you just take the same amount of dough and you want to form them into nice balls. So what you do, you press down with your palm and stretch out the dough to the front, and then flap it back inside. So in this way, if you keep doing that, you're going to end up with a nice round piece of dough that's going to stick together on the bottom. And you want to stretch that dough a little bit so it gets a nice round and kind of stiff outer layer. And then you can just use that later on. So for the baking sheets, you will read that a lot of people, they don't recommend to put baking parchment paper on it, because especially when you use the real lye with the sodium hydroxide, it will basically stick to the parchment paper. So they recommend to either to just like butter down the parchment paper. I use it with the parchment paper, and for me it works just fine. So that's what I'm gonna do. And I'm just gonna form the other pretzels. How is it going over there with everyone for the pretzels? Are you forming? I hope so.
It looks like Roger has a couple of formed already. I don't know
Okay.
anybody else that's cooking along with. If you want to show your trays, or just verbally say how far you are. Oh, Anne is showing hers. Oh, they've got some big
Oh,
ones.
nice. Very nice. So I'm gonna leave mine in the freezer for like 10 minutes, should be fine. Oops. Sometimes you need to let the dough relax a little bit before you stretch it too much.
Dagmar says her dough hasn't risen yet. Would you have any ideas? What could she maybe try, or what might be causing that?
Was it in the oven or in a warm?
We put it in the sun. We covered it up, put it in the sun. We first had it a little bit in the oven, and then we took it out and put it in the sun.
Okay. Then you use the dry yeast.
Dry yeast?
Dry yeast.
The dry yeast.
Dry yeast. Uh-huh.
Was it fresh? Like, was it?
Yeah, so but we just had ordered it from Whole Foods.
Then it should be fine. And you also warmed up your milk, right?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
But it didn't get bigger. The dough didn't get bigger.
Okay. That's interesting. Maybe try to warm up the oven a little bit and put it in there.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Because if the yeast is fresh, it should rise by that time.
Just turn it on. Just turn it on. Turn it on and just let it turn on for just a second.
Little fatties, they did have cold milk, but they added salt. Yeah, it's not gonna be right if it doesn't rise, so we can't make it.
And then also what you find in Germany is So you have the Laugenbrezel, you have the Laugenbrötchen, and you have the Laugenstangen. So the Laugenstangen are more kind of like a roll. So it's just gonna be looking like a roll. So you can do that too. Just form a nice flat roll. But I have to say the pretzels are always my favorite.
Unfortunately, I can't bring you one to the airport this year, Melissa.
I know.
Oh, your daddy's. But next year, Mona will take care of you, right?
Yes, for sure. It will taste even better than when I get to come home.
That's right. Hey, look at your mom. She's doing good.
And then one more.
Dagmar is updating with her dough. They put it into a low heat oven, but she's wondering why does it still need to have a towel on top of the bowl when it's in the oven?
It's just so it doesn't dry out. So you always want to have the bowl covered. Some people even put it in a Tupperware with a top on top, and they say that they let it rise until it pops open. But it's just that it doesn't dry out, and that usually it doesn't get too much airflow on it, so that it's nice and isolated, I would say. Or some people put the foil on top of it, the kitchen foil. You just want to have something over it. Alrighty. So you can let your pretzels rest for just 5 to 10 minutes after you roll them. I'm just gonna check on mine real quick in the freezer. Yeah, they're getting nice and hard. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna preheat the oven to 360 degrees. So in German it's 180 degrees. And I'm going to prepare the pot with the water for the baking soda bath. So we're going to use 1.5 liters. So I think that's about 6 cups of water, or how many ounces? I think 48 ounces. And then you will wonder why is it only so little, but I'm going to show you why. So I'm just going to put that on high heat so that can start to boil. So just the water for the beginning. And while I let these rise real quick here. Actually, I want to see some of the pretzels. So I'm gonna look. Nice. Very nice. Good, Mom. Do we have some other pretzels going on somewhere? Oops, okay. I think I changed the setting. Okay, so I'm just in the meantime, I'm going to show you the Brotzeit or the Festa bread. So that's what I mentioned earlier, that when you are in Germany and then sometimes in some restaurants or so, when they serve you the pretzels with the cold cuts and something like that. So I'm going to show you a little example how you could do that. So usually you're going to find some cold cuts, and usually it's something like the Black Forest ham, which unfortunately I didn't find, but we're going to use some salami, and we can use some prosciutto. It's just a nice way to present it then. Maybe roll these up a little bit. So usually you will just get a different kind of variety of meat and cheeses. And then obviously, like in our case, we're gonna have our spreads. So I'm just gonna put them in some smaller bowls.
Melly, tablespoon ist Teelöffel oder?
Esslöffel.
Esslöffel, okay, danke.
For the baking soda, you can use either around 3 tablespoons of baking soda, or in German Natron, or it's about 60 grams.
Melissa, did you put the baking soda already in the water?
Not yet. You want to get the water hot first, and I'm going to show you why. So I'm going to put my remaining pretzels into the freezer as well. So I will continue with this in a second. So I want to show you the baking soda bath. So you want to heat up the water so that it's starting to boil. And then we are going to put in the baking soda. And then you will see why we leave the water level pretty low. Because once you put it in, it will rise up. I'm not sure how good you can see it right now, but it's bubbling and it's gonna rise. So if you have your pot too full, then it's gonna go over top. So that's not what we want. So once you put the baking soda in, you want to let it boil a little bit so that it dissolves nice. And then we are gonna put the temperature down a little bit so the water calms down. It will still take its time to calm down a little bit, but that's fine. So you can just use a spoon and stir it a little bit. And then at one point it will come down so that there are not too many bubbles anymore. But that's just the chemical reaction that's happening. So I'm gonna go and get my 2 pretzels that I put in the freezer earlier. And you will see that then they are just nice and a little bit more stiff. So you want to have your baking sheet ready. Running a little bit out of space here. And what we are going to do then is you're going to take the pretzel. It's going to be a little stiff on the plate. And you want to put them in upside down. So we're going to put it in upside down. And that's what I'm going to do now. For about 30 seconds. And so that it's all going to be covered, you will see it will rise on top of the water, kind of like the Spätzle, what we did. And you just kind of want to push it down a little bit when it rises, so it will all be covered at the end. So if you would do that with the sodium hydroxide to get the original lye, you would really need to wear gloves, and some people even wear goggles because it's so there's so much acid in it that it's really dangerous. So you can get that actually to do it at home, but if you do so, read all the instructions and be very careful, please. So then once it was in there, you just want to take it out, and then we want to flip it on the baking sheet and just bring it into its form again. And then we're going to do the other one. And then you will see if you touch it, it's really like slimy, because obviously the baking soda also has some acid in it. So should some of your dough come off, you can just put it, you can either even wear also gloves, or you can just press it on there a little bit with some of the utensils, and that's fine. And you will see that the dough is it's gonna get a little looser, it's gonna inflate a little bit. And then once you did that, you can let them sit just for a few minutes. or seconds, that's fine too. And I'm just gonna move that one in the form a little. And really take your time with this whole process, because obviously when you rush things like those two, they are not the prettiest, but baking is just something you don't want to rush. All right, and then what's obviously really typical for the pretzels is to put some salsa on it. In Germany, you even find something called Pretzels, which they use. So it's really like coarse salt. And honestly, I couldn't find any that I liked. So I just took this coarse sea salt that's usually with a grinder, and I broke off the lid. And I'm gonna use that one and just sprinkle the pretzel with salt. And if you don't like salt too much, you can also just use some sesame seeds. Obviously, you can leave it plain, but I just feel like it doesn't look like a real pretzel.
And Dagmar is wondering if she can use a metal slotted spoon in the baking soda solution.
Yeah, it should be fine. I mean, usually you can use baking soda for cleaning and stuff, so it should be fine. Baking soda is really something that has so many different uses. And then at the end, so what I learned is that that's the difference between the Swabian and the Bavarian pretzels, is that now we are gonna cut into the Bauch, into the bigger piece of the pretzel, because that's what you're gonna see when you bake them, that it will open up. So you want a sharp knife and just slide through the dough, not too deep, but just a little bit. Just slice it open. And that's already it. So we're gonna put that in the oven for 15 to 20 minutes. I'm gonna use the timer. And just for timing purposes, I know it's already 2:30 now, but I made some pretzels yesterday. And so you can perfectly freeze your pretzels, but I would recommend that you don't put the salt on it, or even when you store them, you will see that the salt, it will, how do you say that? It will make the pretzel a little wet. So maybe you want to leave that off a little bit and put the pretzel on afterwards, or even just sprinkle it on top when you eat it. So, but that's basically, and you can put some tomatoes on there. And some cornichons, so some small pickles, the small, I like the sweet ones, to be honest.
Petra, what's it know how long in the backoven?
15 to 20 minutes. You will see once it starts to look brown and gets that typical pretzel look. You don't want to leave it in there too long, because then they get dry, but usually 15 to 20 minutes.
Okay, alleweil.
And then, most importantly, the butter. So how I like to eat it, the pretzel, is really the most simple Butterbrezel. So what we usually do is, so here, I hope you can see that. Kind of.
Right, so there, Dagmar said that her salt that she bought was 365 coarse salt from Whole Foods, and it's got that nice look to it.
Perfect.
Barbara's also wondering about Black Forest ham, because it usually looks differently here locally, and it's more of a prosciutto here. I'm a vegetarian, so I'm sorry, I can't pronounce meat names. And she's wondering where you got your Black Forest ham in Atlanta, but I guess in Columbus, actually, since that's where you are.
But so honestly, this one, as I said, this one is the prosciutto because I bought the box that has the salami. But I know Fresh Market has some Black Forest ham. So at the counter where they slice the meats freshly, that's where they have it, for example. And I don't think maybe Whole Foods has it too. I'm not sure, but I think there are also some butchers in Atlanta, probably, maybe even Beaufort Market. They usually have a lot of different things, and actually Beaufort Market also has the fresh yeast, the cake yeast, if someone wants to try that. Yeah, so usually we just slice open our pretzels. I usually break off the middle part because I like to eat it separate. And then I need a knife. And then you really want to put a lot of butter in there. So Mom, please don't look at this right now. I know she will complain. But that's just literally when you go to the bakeries in Germany. In some bakeries, I mean, you bite into a block of butter. Like they don't spare the butter. So but that just tastes so good. And honestly, there are really a lot of discussions and competitions what bakery does the best cakes. At least where I come from, that's like, it's a big topic, and you get really picky of where you want your pretzel to come from. I know I am, so. So you can either just slaughter it in butter, or obviously you can open it and put the different spreads on and enjoy it with that, or you put some butter on it and some of the ham, you can put cheese on it. So really completely what your heart desires. And I mean, most of the time they taste the best when they are fresh, but if you store them, so I stored mine in a box, but so in Germany we have Brotboxen. That's really a bread box. So they are closed, but they are not completely like, for example, a Tupperware box. So there is a little bit of airflow to it, but you can just take them in the morning and you either put them in the oven for just a few minutes so they get nice and crunchy again and just heat it up and it just tastes so much better. Or you can even put them in the toaster just for a little bit so they warm up and get the nice crust around it again. But yeah, that's basically how you make pretzels at home. So I'm gonna check how mine look in the oven. I think this will need a few minutes. How is everyone else doing so far? I hope we get some nice pretzels out there. and honestly, it can be, you might need some practice doing it. It just takes a little while, and I know it did for me. So I made a lot of pretzels to get to the ones that I have right now, and I probably am still gonna experiment a little bit with just the amount of ingredients. It's just like a continuous process of making that perfect pretzel. So, but I think, I mean, this for me is it really tastes like home. So I was really happy with it, and I hope you will be too. Yeah. So I mean, I guess I don't know, Cassidy, if we want to wait or if people might have to drop off. Or
yeah, it's up to everybody else. I guess you have your one example there, or does everybody want to wait and see the rest, or just hopefully see your own in a few minutes once your ovens are done?
Yeah, I hope I can see some pictures, either on Instagram, or if you want to send them over to Cassidy or so. Oh, I can see Dagmar's dough is starting to rise, so that's good news.
But yeah, send the pictures on social media or in an email. We can send them around. But we had a really great time making pretzels again today, or making pretzels for the first time, but our last cooking show today. I think we should everybody hopefully join me in giving Melissa a round of applause. Yes, both for today and for all 3 episodes that we got to enjoy.
You guys, it was a lot of fun.
I kind of want to tell the story about how Melissa actually came to host this, which was just by tagging the Goethe-Zentrum in an Instagram post of her Käsespätzle, where our beer stein was, an actual German. And that's how we came to know her. And we are so grateful that she did tag us on Instagram so that we could invite her to host this wonderful series. She did an absolutely amazing job. I think everybody can, I hope I speak for everybody when I say that we learned a lot about being able to cook German recipes, either in Germany, for those of you over there, or in the US with ingredients available here or substitute ingredients available here. I think it was absolutely wonderful. And thank you so, so much, Melissa, for being so willing to do this for us and thinking such tasty and traditional recipes for us in fun and new, exciting ways. And so easy too, I think. I think hopefully everybody can agree with me that these were pretty easy for all cooking levels.
And I think there was a question where in Germany from, so I'm from a small town called Gravenneudorf, which it's between Heidelberg and Karlsruhe. It's really.
Nee, ich bin von Hochstetten.
No.
Jawohl.
It's crazy. I live
Neudorf. I used to go swimming there as a kid because they were the only place that had a pool.
we still have an outdoor pool.
Actually, Bruchsal. Es war Bruchsal. Aber I've been, most of my life, I grew up in Hochstetten and I went to the American schools in Karlsruhe. Oh my gosh.
That is just, I mean, the word is the little village. It's absolutely crazy. Yeah. My first apartment was in Hochstetten, actually.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I lived there I literally moved in there in September, October of 2014. And when I moved in, I had this gut feeling I was not going to be there for that long. And I didn't know why, but literally half a year later, I got the job offer in the US and I moved out again.
Nice. We were just back there last year, September, to visit family. I have a cousin that still lives in Karlsruhe, but I have friends that are like family. They live in Hochstetten, Linkenheim, Hochstetten und Eggenstein. Yeah.
We grew up in Leopoldshafen.
Ah, yeah.
And Dagmar says she's also from Karlsruhe.
Bitte?
Dagmar says she's from Karlsruhe.
Oh, wonderful. It's old home week.
Dagmar ist von Karlsruhe?
Dagmar ist von Karlsruhe.
Ja, ich bin von Karlsruhe. Also ich bin auch in diesen Städten gewesen, Hochstetten und so. Mein Bruder hat in Neureuth gewohnt.
Ja. In Neureuth. That is just...
Also Neureuth.
Ja. Wunderbar.
Kleine Welt ist das halt.
We miss you, Melissa.
And Montse and David are asking if we're planning any additional cooking classes or presentations in December and the new year. I guess I'll speak for Goethe-Zentrum first. This will be our last installment of this series. Hopefully we'll be able to maybe bring it back in the future. But for now, this is it for us. We are having another series that's going right now called Mach kein Theater, which is sort of, a sarcastic thing for don't do theater. And it's actually encouraging people to be in theater. And it's a 6-episode series behind the curtain into the look of German theater, hosted by our new executive director, Oliver, who spent a lot of time in Hamburg in the theater world. So that's happening on Sunday, tomorrow, and also next Sunday. And hopefully Melissa might have some updates about her food blog and continuing videos or something like that.
Yeah, so maybe we can do some more classes in the future. I would obviously love to see everyone, so that would be great. But I really, really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed how you guys were so active and involved, and love to see your results. And I just really enjoyed it, and it was such a great group, and getting to know you. And now that it even, comes out that we are all so close together, and even though far away, but so close together. That's just awesome. Yeah. So thank you everyone so much.
And I think even if there aren't classes, maybe just to keep an eye on Melissa's Instagram, she posts really gorgeous photos of her recipes with the recipes right in the post, so you can make them at home all the time. The link is in the chat again. Even if you're not on Instagram, you should be able to at least view it in your web browser and follow along her story and her journey with her food blog.
And if
Thank you so much, everybody.
Dishes that you like to make, please shoot me a message and then we can do that. So I would love to hear, obviously, if there's some things that you would like to make and don't know how, so that we can obviously organize that. So.
Dampfnudeln.
It's going to be a popular one.
No, for sure.
Well, danke nochmal euch allen. Vielen herzlichen Dank, dass ihr mitgemacht habt. Thank you everybody for participating, for being here, whether it was just this episode or multiple episodes. We had a really wonderful time. Hopefully you learned a little bit of German for cooking and a little bit of German recipes. And we wish you a wonderful rest of your weekend.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thank you.
Danke. Tschüss.
Tschüss.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen.